Welcome, Galina. I am so ready for this conversation. I have been looking forward to it for months now and just cannot wait to introduce you to this audience and to see what happens in our conversation. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. Thank you for the invitation. It's a true pleasure.
I want to introduce y'all to Galina. Galina is a somatic practitioner and an author based in Colorado. She helps people who struggle with emotional eating recover and enjoy peace, well-being, and authentic connection with themselves and their loved ones. And she's also the author of a mind-blowingly incredible book called Peace with Self, Peace with Food, a trauma healing approach for emotional eating. Is there anything else you want to share with us about how you are, where you are, anything I left out of that bio, anything at all?
That felt very, very concise and true to what my life is. Supporting people daily in my program, and then always thinking about the next book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where do you live in Colorado specifically?
I am in Longmont, Colorado, which is in the Front Range, about 20 minutes north of Boulder.
That's right. Oh, I love Colorado.
It's lovely this time of year, especially when everybody comes to see the aspen.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. Well, we are planning on having a conversation today around the content of Galina's book and body of work and more. A lot of it is around what she was just telling me, something we might call a nourishment challenge in relationship to how we experience our bodies and food and beyond. And we are really looking forward to breaking down how to approach these in a non-pathologizing way, a way where our body gets to be included in the conversation and where there's hope. There's hope for healing and another side. Anything you want
Mhm.
to add to that?
I think that one of the things that I truly appreciate about the biology is that the map of healing is already inside. And oftentimes, behaviors and symptoms are kind of their own compass on the map of healing. But when we don't have a lens through which to view them in a way that they make sense, it can feel like the body is a problem, or the body can't be trusted, or our biology is some kind of a mean trickster that's here to take away from the fullness of life. And what I keep discovering in my own body and somatic experience and that of my students is that actually, when we do have an understanding, it can bring this kind of self-emergent compassion and growth, knowing that the body is actually the solution and not the issue. And that is a huge shift that doesn't come from a mindset shift, like you can't affirmation your way into it, but it's an experiential, embodied, and it's something that feels so true and it can't be falsified that in some way we wonder how we missed it all along. And when you've come out of a life of shock and relational developmental trauma, it's easy to miss it. It's easy to miss it. And so that's kind of what I want to add, is that the maps, the biological maps of self-organization and self-healing are here. The symptoms and the issues are the compass. And then sometimes we just need people that have figured out their own compass and their own maps to make the journey a little shorter for us.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's so clear in reading your book and your bio and just, meeting you and knowing you that you have done so much work, so much personal work, and also study around being able to deliver this to people in a way that is simplified because it can feel so daunting and complex and confusing. And you break it down in a way that's like, oh, Oh my goodness. Okay, I've been doing mindset work forever. Of course that's not going to work. This is the path, and it's actually the way you've broken it down makes it faster and clearer than anything we could be doing around mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a place for mindset. But there's things you can't mindset your way into or out of. And those are the things of the body. And kind of the body is an underworld. And the underworld is wanting to be lived and not be bossed around.
Hmm. Can you say more about that? Like, what do you mean that the body is an un
There are things that we experience that are kind of the surface, they're on the surface. And sometimes our own ideas of what life should be, or conditioning or expectations, kind of leave us at the surface, like this expectation that I should always be calm, or I should always feel good, or should always be happy, or forgiving, or compassionate, or once people start nervous system learning, I should always be in my window of capacity. But the reality is the body is this and in the and zone, there can really be this descent into really experiencing what is not our preference. My
Mhm.
preference might be to be calm and kind and forgiving, and this kind of bodhisattva kind of image. But the body is might not have it some days. Some days I might be angry and unhinged, and some days I might be in the depths of despair and an existential crisis and feeling survival terror, and that doesn't feel good in the body. And so I think in some way, when I say the body is the underworld, it requires this intimacy and a descent in away from our concepts and ideas of what we prefer. Un,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Until we are at peace with all of it. I love this quote by Richard Rohr, which is peace is when, all of me is here and I'm not fighting it anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There's a concept in the Theravada Buddhist tradition that's talked about a lot where it's about the two arrows. We have the experience of maybe we're in hysterics one day, or we're in survival terror, or things are just kind of feeling meh. And then we layer it with this, that's the pain. And the second arrow is the suffering, the expectation of
Yeah.
how we wish it would be or how we think it should be. And
Right.
so there's that acceptance and this welcomeness of the whole human experience.
Yeah. And a real intimacy with the wisdom of it and
Mhm.
the intelligence of the responses. And in that intimacy, we kind of traverse this land of transformative grief, because what happens with trauma is that a lot of what the blueprint, this kind of original way of coming into the world, is this acorn that wants to become the mighty oak, the blueprint that's in the acorn. This wants to be lived. And if trauma hinders us in any way from becoming who we are here to become, that hurts. And so in this continued emergent intimacy of the embodied descent, we meet all this grief. And it has the power to transform us and make us more of who we are. But it's not a comfortable experience. And here comes my work, your work, the work of other somatic embodiment colleagues who support an organization of the biology so that the descent doesn't feel untethering, but it feels organizing.
Mm. Oh, I got like goosebumps, champagne bubbles when you said that, because trauma is often too much too fast. And we'll see people doing healing processes that they descend into the underworld so quick, and it kind of blows their mind. It's fascinating, it's intense, it's even exciting. And they feel all the feels, it's quite cathartic.
Yeah.
But then there's this like, it was too much too fast. And then we have to do the cleanup for that.
Yeah.
And so when you talked about a descent that feels organizing, I was like, oh, what
Yeah.
might that look like? And what might that give us?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, it's almost like I have this image, it's interesting, of walking in, like when you get to like a really beautiful botanical garden that's really well organized,
Mm.
that there's a way, that there's paths and there's ways to enjoy the white garden and the rose garden and the Japanese garden, and then the fountains and the lakes and the ponds and the koi fish, and there's an order and there's an expectation that you're going to have a good experience. And there's a way in which we have that in the map of our biology as well, this ability to orient to what's good, what's right, what's nourishing, what's replenishing, what's energizing, what supports calm and focus and well-being and connection. And oftentimes that doesn't get developed enough. So there's this undeveloped botanical garden, and then there's overdeveloped fear of whatever happened. And there's a way in which I think in the trauma healing space, if we can really make these beautiful botanical gardens around the whole of trauma, then you have a beautiful botanical garden around a crater, and then eventually the crater gets mossy, and that's beautiful, and that becomes a pond with koi fish. And I think if we look at it as how much goodness can we add instead of the what's wrong attention of what's wrong, what happened, without minimizing, of course, what happened. There's a place for that. But then we can have a pleasant expectation of what it's like to be intimate with the physiology.
Oh, so refreshing. We don't have to take a bulldozer to the garden. We don't have to cover it over with anything pretty. We don't have to fix it or make it different. We just allow.
Yeah, yeah. And create, right? Our physiology and the somatic space, it's infinitely creative. It's like you just got champagne bubbles. That was very creative. And that's there for all of us all the time.
Yeah.
And it's waiting to be co-activated in conversation, in connection, in the goodness of what bodies can do together when there's a desire for growth and mutual support, and there's grace, and then there's gratitude.
Hmm. That concept of, like the goodness growing, adding the goodness, just like really becoming aware of goodness as well as the fear that many of us have been run by for such a good reason. Not everybody has a concept of goodness or being able to rest into the goodness or take up the nourishment from goodness. And I wonder if you might be able to describe nourishment in all of its forms, maybe in relationship to eating and food and body. But when we have such a blueprint for fear and not enough and shame and contraction and being up here, how do we begin to learn and orient to a new way around taking up nourishment from goodness?
Okay. Oh, I love that question so much. So let's begin by this basic orientation and a little bit of the physiology, that in order to take anything in, we need to be in contact with the meeting place of inside and outside. So think of the ocean meeting the sandy shore, or the rocks meeting the lake in the mountain, or two people holding hands, right, meeting each other. There's an outside and there's an inside. And eating and nourishment evolve in relationship.
Yeah.
In the beginning, so preconception, there's a whole bunch of things that happen, but this is not our topic today. But at conception, we have this forming of a new being, of the embryo, right? We have the cell that starts to divide, the two cells that get together, they begin to divide, and then an embryo forms. And then there's this way in which the embryo tumbles its way down and begins to find inside the uterus the place which feels best. So there's this twirling and whirling and kind of like a dog, we're just talking about Labradors before we started our recording today, in which the lab is gonna like make its little turn on the couch or the carpet or outside in the grass to turn and turn and turn and find a way that feels best to plop there and rest. And so in the same way, we begin by kind of twirling our way and wiggling our way to the most hospitable part of the uterus as we attach, and then these very complex systems and structures and tissues start to form so we can begin to feed. So from the very beginning, there's a symbiotic connection. And if the environment is not right for feeding, we're not going to attach. Or we're going to attach, we're going to check it out and be like, nope. And so there's a large number of implantations that just don't continue successfully. Like there's an implantation and then it doesn't continue successfully after because it's not right. And so that's something that the biology is always looking for. What is nourishing? What is good? What is supportive? What is helpful? Because this is what supports life. Like we're here to be alive. We're here for the acorn to become the mighty oak. And we're always going to move between what supports life. Now, eventually, when the space gets too small inside and it's time to come out and meet our siblings and the family and everybody who's excited to meet us, there's a way in which we make our way out. And there's more ideal ways to make our way out and less ideal ways to make our way out. That as soon as we're out, we're not little fishies anymore. We're out on dry land. The sensory system, the attachment system, the defense system have to attune to what's happening now that we're on dry land. And one of the first things we do is we find nourishment. And that can get interrupted in many, many ways. It can get interrupted, the birth process can get interrupted in many ways, within medical ways and other ways, that this ideal first coming onto the planet, instead of being relaxing and nourishing, it actually ends up being stressful and disorienting, right? So if you're somebody like me, who was born in a very scary way and was separated from mom for 6 days, you might end up having a very different relationship with nourishment than somebody who got to come, in a way that was a little more supportive for nourishment. And that the physiology here has a choice. I can orient towards self-protection and protecting my resources and making sure that on this intersection of inside and outside, what's happening inside my body, what's being offered on the outside, that nothing bad happens, that I don't continue to receive the bad thing. Or I can organize towards connection and go, well, the outside is good enough, and I'm happy to receive what you're offering me. So I organize myself towards connection. And so we know this as somatic practitioners, as trauma therapists, we know that when somebody moves outside of their window of capacity, that the system is actually organizing towards protection and not towards connection. And how necessary connection is, and the capacity to be in connection in order to receive nourishment. And so when we've had trauma, developmental shock trauma, the combination of both, complex trauma at the end of it, we might have a physiology that has a very challenging relationship with taking in what's on the outside. And I was remembering just, I think yesterday, I was telling a colleague, I was remembering how hard it was for me to be at the dinner table as a highly sensitive child who feels the emotions of everybody around me, that I could enjoy the food coming to the table. I always enjoyed preparing food with my mom, and I really loved the smells and the creativity in the kitchen. I enjoyed getting the food to the table. Like I knew what I wanted and I could get it. But the moment that I was sitting at the table with the disruption in everybody else's bodies and them not having what they needed to be emotionally supported and congruent, I could feel their distress, and now I could not take anything in because what I was taking in was their emotional state. What I was feeling was my worry for my parents. And I wasn't actually available on the inside. My enteric nervous system was not available to be taking in food because I was already full. And I was full of feeling everyone else on the inside. And what my senses would have needed was to be able to be alone, to be able to process the distress of sensing my parents' distress in connection with somebody who could have held me. That wasn't them. And then once my system would soothe, I could then take food in.
Yeah.
And that's something that I know about myself when I visit my family of origin now. Like that pattern has not disappeared. And so what I do is I'll usually just wait for everybody to go to bed and then I eat because I can't. And if I tried to, I'll get a stomach ache, which is what I had as a child. Like I had chronic digestive issues because I was always eating on top of all this concern, nervousness, worry, and internal disruption. And in some ways, I feel like it's so important that we know ourselves because the food might be here, but I might not be in a state that I can take it in. The help might be here, but I might not be in a state where I can receive the help without guilt. The good direction from my therapist might be here, but I might not be in a state where I'm ready to hear what someone else has for my life because I'm so used to doing everything alone.
Yeah.
And so the intersection between inside and outside and what trauma does to put us in protection instead of connection impacts everything, all the ways that we take in nourishment, not just from food, but also from loved ones, also from colleagues, also from the environment. It can be very hard to even be nourished by our own achievements, which oftentimes people with disordered eating will say, I'm a perfectionist. And what I hear is my own achievements don't nourish me. So I keep putting the bar higher and higher so that hopefully one day I get nourished by the intensity because I'm used to intensity, not because I'm used to being nourished. And so oftentimes on the path to recovery, what we're doing is really taking it to the lowest threshold of, can you notice one sip of tea?
Yes.
Which eventually helps domino all the way to, can you notice that you published this article before you tell me that your advisor wanted you to publish whatever next thing and you don't even have time to celebrate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stitching
Yeah.
all those moments together
Yeah.
after we savor them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I can't help but notice the amount of times you use the word receive as you were describing the experience of understanding goodness and nourishment and
Yeah.
how our physiology actually, when you look at that inside outside experience, it just can't receive when it's already full of other things.
Right. Or when it's trying to express.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'll often give people, it might be a little bit of a disgusting example, but it's very memorable. Like it's very hard to eat while you're throwing up.
Yeah.
And they'll just look at me like, what are you saying? And it's like, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you've got something to say, that's something that's coming out.
Mhm.
And how often, especially when we're looking at behaviors like purging, people feel so much shame. And at the same time, if we don't try to take the behavior away, but we can add different ways of expressing, I can't take it anymore. This is too much. I don't want to listen. I've had enough. that there's other ways to express that that's not just through purging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm really appreciating is with this type of awareness, we don't have to make any of the behaviors or expressions wrong. It makes so much sense that we do what we do. And I also really wanted to underline, that you even shared, when I go to my family of origin, here is what I need to do. It's not like healing is everything looks how we think it's supposed to look, that now we can eat with our family of origin and digest and not have a stomachache. Actually, healing for you might look like eating after they're in bed. And so we can't like squish our healing into some other paradigm beyond what is truly nourishing and supportive and loving for our own bodies and our own nervous systems.
Absolutely. I love the way you summed it up. And I think there's a real, people will talk about like self-acceptance or self-love. And I think it's an act of just really a deep, loving intimacy with ourselves to understand our systems and what our systems need for nourishment. What are the conditions under which I can feed myself? And it might not be in a loud restaurant with the big, I don't know, there's like a restaurant in our town that has like 20 television screens or something. I cannot eat there, right? So that might be, oh, I love their menu, but let's order out and eat in the park across the restaurant. Because eating is a sensory experience and it is a sensual experience. All the way to it can be an erotic experience for some people.
Mm.
And so if it's going to involve the senses, the through our five senses and then the three senses that are on the inside, we are always checking in what's happening outside, what's happening inside. And it has to be a good experience where I can feel connected and my shields can be down so I can nourish myself. As opposed to um, I'm recovered when I can eat anywhere, everywhere, at all times. And I just bungee jumped and then I can have a snack. You can't. You just bungee jumped. It's going to take 3 hours till you can eat,
Yeah.
right? And no one gets to tell you when you are ready. And that's what makes things kind of hard when, your partner and you might have different requirements for nourishing. They might be able to eat at the dinner table that cost, I don't know, $3,000 at Pottery Barn, and it's really pretty. But the moment you sit there, you can't eat because your associational network gets pinged. And the dinner table was where you got hit.
Yeah.
And so what am I going to go and do 500 hours of therapy on all the stuff that happened at the dinner table? Or am I going to take my plate and I'm going to get myself to the couch and I teach my students how to make a couch nest. And I'm going to support my elbows. I'm going to support my back. I'm going to put 2 pillows under my plate. I'm going to put a lap pad that's heavy. I'm going to play Emily in Paris and I'm going to eat. And that might be an hour after my partner ate because also our circadian clocks are different. And so that is what I need to be nourished. So if I force myself to sit on that beautiful dinner table, I'm not going to have a beautiful experience inside. And so checking with our five senses on the outside and internally, checking with the proprioceptive system, the interoceptive, the vestibular, what makes a moment nourishing is these 8 systems being synced up enough. It's kind of like good enough parenting. There's no ideal, like good enough state for nourishment so that I'm actually eating in a physiology that can receive food. And that's a physiology that I need to get to know because I might not even know what that's like. And I might expect myself to eat when it's 8 o'clock, when it's lunch break, when it's dinner time with friends. My body might not be ready.
Yeah. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier about somatic awareness and exploration is it can be playful, it can be creative. because there are no two people that will have the exact same thing that supports all eight systems to be able to take up nourishment. And so we get to get curious. We get to go, let's try this. Nope, that wasn't it. Maybe let's try this. Yeah, I can take in 5% of this. Okay. So it's just kind of like creating, it's an art project with a lot of curiosity, a lot of compassion, a lot of space to just try it on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what is also necessary to remember is that a physiology that's been adapted to dealing with trauma might need some reforming, some somatic reforming, some somatic reshaping before it can take in nourishment. The cranial nerves that support nourishment and support connection, they can get completely malnourished and electrically and energetically when the electrical energy in the system is going to the sympathetic system, like to the fight flight nerves, or going deep into the high tone dorsal of the belly, the vagus. And so in some ways, what I'm seeing is we are lacking the access to the hardware that helps us know until we kind of wake it up. And
Yeah.
so that's why in my book, there's practices to support the cranial nerves. And in my program, we work with primitive reflexes. Like we work with all these ways that return the flow to the river of life and connection so that I can be physiologically equipped, biologically equipped for the nourishment that I want to experience. Because if my physiology got co-opted for survival, I might need to, give it a little nudge so it can oscillate towards connection without trying to overpower it, without trying to hack it, but realizing that if my posture is a posture of collapse, that's not a posture that supports breathing
Mhm.
and digestion. If my face is flat and my eyes are expressionless because of how much dorsal I've been in, then I might need to support the eyes and support the cranial nerves of the face so that I can get a little bit of flow in that direction. And I'm sure you as a somatic therapist as well, there's so much we do with the environment, with orienting, with beauty, with the colors and the shapes and the textures. And this is so much waking up the eyes to non-food things so the eyes can then wake up to food things. But we're really pinging the system with all of our practices so that what is naturally expected to be there can work again, can flow again. Because it's a biological, it's a bottom-up thing. We can't will our way into it. And people can be so frustrated. They're like, I tried this and it didn't work. It's like, well, might take more than once to get electricity flowing, energy flowing in areas that have been kind of like the dark neighborhoods of the city, right? Like if there's a power outage and a whole neighborhood of the city is without power for 3 or 4 months, it might take time to restore the electrical wiring so that the houses can get their lights back on.
Yeah. And in my experience, it's a little bit at a time. Like,
Yes.
how
Mm-hmm.
can we introduce a few minutes here and a few minutes later today and a few minutes tonight instead of trying to just get all the lights on right now and then forgetting about it for 2 weeks, and to remind ourselves, okay, I am taking in this beautiful aspen tree in my field of my eyes. It's actually really pleasant. I'm here, I'm present, maybe 3 breaths and then it's gone, but it's like to remind myself in those 3 breaths, it's safe to feel this. It's safe to have a little ease, have a little rest, have some connection. And then we go off, we do our thing, we go into our familiar patterns, and then later in the day, 3 more breaths. What can I take in that is
Mm.
good? And it's not bypassing all the things that hurt and feel bad. It's just adding to, like you were talking about in the botanical garden of,
Yeah.
yes, everything gets to be here, but when we're stuck in that old paradigm of fear, we miss for good reason. The survival doesn't see all the beauty around. The survival just sees the thing we need to get away from. So we began to open our awareness slowly, slowly in bite-sized pieces so that over time we can get used to tolerating just a little bit more and then a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. And these words come to me as I'm listening to your beautiful reflection, and it's just to trust the good, to trust the good. As somebody who has quite a bit of history of like kind of more of what we call like anxious and disorganized attachment, to me there was always this feeling like if I allow anything good, it's going to get taken away.
Mm-hmm.
And that there is goodness that we get to keep, and it's not going to get taken away, but it's little bits by little bits by little bits, and the thresholds of tolerance to goodness grow. Like, we're not just doing little bits at a time, like putting pennies in a jar. Eventually the jar grows and you can put quarters in it, and we can put, like, I don't know, whoever has cash these days anymore, we can put dollar bills in it, and eventually it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. And I think that's such a beautiful model, that as it grows, we also see others growing around us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, look, these people are planting too, which is why I love group work so much. And I know you have a group program as well, that we can actually, people can witness each other's unfurling and unfolding into goodness. And then the nervous system goes, oh, well, maybe I do get to keep this good stuff. Maybe I
Yeah.
do get to keep it.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because so many of us are waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, why would I open my heart? Why would I allow myself to revel in this beauty when it's just going to get taken away, or it's just something bad's going to happen? I'm going to have to feel the pain of the loss or the disappointment or the shame. It's like
Yeah.
when you said we get to keep some of it, it's like, oh, well, that's a new thought.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we can have this buffer then of goodness inside, that if something does come and there is unpleasant activation and there's loss and grief and all the things that come if you're going to be on the planet. Like, I sometimes think of losses like the rent we pay on the planet. It's like, okay, I pay rent for this planet in loss and grief. That's fine. When the bad things come, that I am resourced, I have a buffer of goodness that I can meet these challenges, as opposed to I don't have anything because I was protecting myself for everything that's good, and now I don't have a buffer, and now I feel defeated and I'm in despair and hopeless, helpless and isolated, and I don't trust the universe.
Yeah. Especially as a highly sensitive person, that buffer is exceptionally small sometimes.
Yeah, I know that so well. And working with the sensory system, for me, it's always so challenging. I'm high seeking in my movement and my vestibular system. So I need a lot of action. And at the same time, I need a lot of quiet.
Mhm.
And so balancing these two has always been so interesting. Um, like, for me, the ideal environment would be if I have a Zen garden in which I can do very stimulating movement, like an acrobatics gym in a Zen
Yeah,
garden.
I love that so much.
And just knowing our sensory systems is so important.
Mhm.
And so often, like I tell my students, it's so challenging to be in our bodies because you have the nervous system that's doing the job of three systems: the defense, the attachment, and the sensory. And at any given point, I might be very upset at my partner because there's an unpleasant noise outside. And that is so humbling. And it just can bring you to your knees. I was just mean to my partner because of the leaf blower.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
go explain that to somebody who can't slow down
Yes.
enough to go, oh, you yelled at me because you were hungry. It's like,
Yeah.
we're constantly managing this soft animal that lives inside that's very easy to upset, with this sensitive attachment and nervous and sensory system. And it is humbling as hell. and also is the way out to knowing ourselves.
It's so important. And I feel like we're even just scratching the surface. I hope we can talk again because this is connected and related to not just people who experience themselves as having maybe eating challenges or body image. I mean, chronic illness. We could learn so much by reading your book. So
Mhm.
many things that we're faced in our life that feel unpleasant or challenging. All of this applies. And you talk in your book about boundaries and how our nervous systems overshoot and undershoot all the time, and just getting to know, like, really truly what is most supportive for our own system, our own history, our own present moment through our body, knowing that
Yeah,
we can absolutely have a profound change in our physiology, which will be a profound life change. It's
yeah.
just so much and so important.
Mm.
I want to talk about all of that, but I know we're coming to the end, and I wonder maybe if you'd be open to talking a little bit about the importance of breath and how our breath is maybe a mirror or carries important information for us we're in this experience of getting to know ourselves. And I don't know if you have a practice you might be able to give us or guide us through.
Mm. I love that. I always think of Thomas Hubel, who says, breath is an old friend that's always with us. And the way that I'm breathing, I have some tears coming up as I'm saying it, the way that I'm breathing is telling me how I'm doing.
Mhm.
That it is my own internal, the diaphragm and the nerves and the lungs in some way are constantly feeding back to me like the ocean with its waves. How is the weather inside? Like I can look at the ocean and I can know, oh, there's no waves today. It's very calm, and I can go and I can paddle on the ocean today. Or there's a day that there's a big surge and only the crazy surfers will be going today out there. That somehow I can look at the ocean and the ocean can tell me what the weather is and what my behavior will be with the ocean. I think it's the same with the breath. If I can connect with the breath, it can tell me how I'm doing and what my behavior can be with myself.
Mhm.
That being said, I'm a big lover of easy breathing and attending to good breathing posture that supports the parasympathetic system. And would you be interested in hearing about good breathing posture? Okay.
Yes.
So if you can rest your whole body against a wall, that's best because it can easily allow you to feel the back of the body and the back of the head. And it kind of brings that kind of axial orientation where my head can really be on top of my shoulders because that allows the airway to be positioned biomechanically in a way that supports easy breathing. So that's one, is my head over my shoulders. And if you just lean against the wall while you're listening to this, or you can kind of maybe get a hand behind your head if you're in a chair that the back of the body is supported, but maybe the head is not. And I can just make sure my head is over my shoulders. And then even taking a moment here to see how that impacts the breath. And then tongue is on the roof of the mouth. The tip of the tongue is in the same place that we pronounce the letter N. So like Nick. Yeah. There. And then the teeth are not touching. So the jaw is gently relaxed. The teeth are not touching. With the tongue on the roof of the mouth, what happens is the airway is a little bigger. And then I can inhale through the nose without making sounds. So it's a quiet inhale instead of like hoovering the air in. And then my exhale through the nose can be a little longer than the inhale. So can I inhale, invite the air into my nose, into my lungs, into a relaxed belly. And then can I exhale and make it a little longer, maybe a third of a second longer. And at the bottom of the exhale, can I patiently wait for the next wave? That my body itself is going to breathe in. And my job is to track the exhale, wait a little, and see this next wave come in. And usually if you prolong the exhale enough, what will happen is you might get a louder breath in, which we call reset breath. Relaxing the shoulders, relaxing the belly, enjoying the breath as the ocean that I get to witness coming and going with its waves from the inside. So the only thing we're actually doing here is extending the exhale a little bit. Everything else is just awareness of how the physiology responds.
It's immediate, the response in the body. It's so cool.
Yeah. So when we extend the exhale, the heart slows down. And there's more space and a variable space between the heartbeats. So heart rate variability increases. And it's very easy if you have access to your nose. Regulating the system, down regulating stress in the system is very easy because that's how the physiology is built. That nasal breathing, silent breathing warms the air, increases nitrous oxide, helps with the O2 CO2 balance in the blood, the pH of the blood, heart rate variability. This is all built into the physiology. And if your nose isn't working, it can be challenging to downregulate the physiology. Yeah.
I am so grateful that we got to spend this time
Me
together.
too. What a joy.
Just so cool to meet you and know you're doing this work in the world is so important. And you're working at the core of the core. So many people need what you're offering. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing your work, all of it.
Thank you. Thank you for spreading the good word and helping so many of us be seen and felt and heard by others, which is your gift. And thank you for just being a force of good. It's just beautiful to be in your presence.
Oh, thank you. Well, I want to tell everybody while your book is called Peace with Self and Peace with Food, I really think we could just call it peace. I really think that we can all learn so much from this about how to take care of our nervous systems, how to understand our behaviors and expressions, and how to help ourselves really come home in a way that feels better. What else are you offering? How can people find you, and what will they find?
Yeah, I'm very easy to find. It's Galina Denzel everywhere on the internet as myself. You can find me on Instagram and follow me there. You can come to my website, purebelonging.com. I would love, I think, I shared with you a link to a free chapter of my book if people want to grab that. And that will put you on my newsletter where you receive something weekly that tells you more about how food and nourishment and nervous system health go together. I love writing. I love giving people value in my newsletter so you can keep learning. And if you feel called to read my book, that would be an honor. It's on my website, it's on Amazon, it's in the libraries if you want to check it out from the library. And I have a 6-month program that is my core offering that allows people to really get intimate with the nervous system and allows them to really understand how to support themselves and build these beautiful gardens of goodness inside. And I also, every few months, will run a masterclass on a different subject. And this fall, I have an 8-week sacred rest masterclass to support people's physiologies to know how to yield and move away from survival into receptivity. And then in the winter, in February, I yearly have a boundaries masterclass, which is another 8-week offering, which people love. And that's kind of what I do. I do my 6-month program. I do the master classes here and there. And every summer there's a retreat. And so if you're on my newsletter or come to the website, you'll stay in good touch with me.
Amazing. Those links will be in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was so good to talk with you today.
I appreciate you so much.